before we get into your newest album, let's talk about, of course, like your history with music. Like how did that begin? Like your uprising, how did that
Yeah,
start?
yeah. So, really the catalyst, the thing that allowed me to get going was there was a radio station where I was in school. You're in school, right? Yeah. So, I was like your age, and the local radio station had this unsigned talent competition where the artists that won were given money to record an album, like $17,000 or something like that to record an album. And this was 2005. So the biggest barrier really for an independent artist was like being able to get into the studio because this wasn't quite the laptop recording era yet. You really had to get into a studio and stuff. And so I was fortunate enough to win that competition and finish my first album um, when I think I was in my third or fourth year. You guys would call it senior year, I guess. And so that allowed me to kind of get going and get out there and send the album out to different you know magazines and websites and blogs and that kind of thing, and then also play some shows. So that was the one that allowed me to just participate in music and get started. And then I got signed to a small label here for my second album, and then that one allowed me to take it to another level and build an audience nationally and make videos, that kind of thing.
Mm. And the genre you do is hip hop, but in a way, does it define your music? Like, is it a different type of hip hop than just like regular hip hop, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. What I would say is what I do is pretty traditional hip hop, pretty classic hip hop, but also in the classic hip hop way, I try to incorporate my own influences and make sure it's a little bit unique to me. I really uh subscribe to those old school hip hop values of you should be unique. And so what I do is it's traditional in the sense that, it's beats and rhymes. I care a lot about lyricism. I care a lot about kind of the fundamentals of hip hop in terms of that sampled, chopped up sound, and making sure it's got that kind of groove to it. But I always try to incorporate my own stories, my own way of seeing things and saying things. Representing who I am and where I come from, and being proud of that. And talking about what I find interesting and what I feel is a bit of a unique contribution. What I don't necessarily hear other people touching on or speaking on in a particular way. So yeah, it is hip hop. It's straight up hip hop. It's classic hip hop, but it's my own little contribution to it.
Mm. And could you also maybe describe the music scene where you're from? Like, what's the, hip hop scene in Canada?
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say is I'll talk about Canada and I'll talk about Toronto as well specifically. So, Toronto is a music city. Every genre, you know, is here, and there's tons of clubs and places to play, places to see live music, great DJs. I think we have the best DJs in the world. It is the most diverse city in the world, and as a result, musically, it's also very diverse and has a long history with hip hop as well. Um, so that's Toronto. And then I would say Canada. Canada is like a strange country because it's massive geographically, but the population is small. So people are very spread out. Like I think we are at 38 million people, which is maybe half of California in terms of population, but spread across country. So when I think of hip hop in Canada, I think about this kind of range of sounds spread out across the country. Um, you go to the West Coast, you'll probably hear some classic West Coast sounds. It's pretty laid back and funky, over there. And then Toronto, people describe it as pretty similar to New York hip hop, um, because it's just a similar city in a lot of ways. It's a big city. Some of the patterns of immigration are similar. Like there's just some similarities. Um, but then in the middle of the country, there's also hip hop, and it's their own flavor because because they're over there. You know what I mean? Winnipeg is similar to like a Minneapolis. You know, it's a very musical city as well, but you know, because of that isolation, they develop their own flavor. So yeah, Canadian hip hop is very diverse. You know, because geographically it's such a huge place. But yeah, and then in terms of Toronto, I would say Toronto has like a long hip hop history. We have hip hop going back to almost the same as like late 70s, you know, early 80s. And then we just have an incredibly diverse city and an incredibly diverse music scene as a result.
Mm. And speaking of your newest album,
Mm.
um, do you take any like I guess like inspirations, especially like from the scenery where you're from, or is there like any other inspirations?
Yeah, always, you know, a lot of my collaborators are in Toronto. So, yeah, I think I naturally take a lot of inspiration just from, again, the diversity of our scene. You know, if I look at my list of collaborators, I don't do this intentionally, but when I look at it, it's like people with different backgrounds, people that, you know, so that just comes out here because that's just our city and that's our vibe, and different musical backgrounds too, different cultural backgrounds, different musical backgrounds. We all kind of are together here in Toronto. At least, you know, that's what my world looks like when I'm, you know, here. So I get a lot of inspiration from that. Yeah, i think I think that's like my biggest inspiration in terms of like geography. You know, I travel when I'm touring and stuff like that, but I would say I'm most inspired by where I'm at in terms of places, yeah, and scenes.
Mm. And is there a story you want to tell through your newest album?
Yeah, so the thing I was really interested in exploring with this album and writing songs about is this human thing of, how can I put it? This human thing of being afraid of change, being afraid of closing a chapter, you know, and stepping into the unknown. Um, And the reason why I became interested in that is because I started looking out at our world and like a lot of our problems and a lot of our tensions. Let's take, for example, like climate, you know, the climate crisis. I was thinking about that and I was thinking, you know, part of the problem is that we don't want to change. Like there's lifestyle things, there's ways of being, you know, that involve fossil fuels and stuff that we're just like, I don't know how to change. I think if I had to guess, I would say I think that's part of the problem is that like we know that we should do something differently, but like we don't know what that is. And it's hard to abandon what you know and move towards something you don't know, even if it's obvious that that's what you need to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Or to give another example on more of like a personal level, like if you've ever had a friend or known someone that's in a toxic relationship and everybody's like, why don't you just leave that relationship? It's like, well, it's hard to leave what you know. So that's the thing I became interested in. And I was like, let me write songs about this coming from different angles at different levels, you know, like the song you talked about, Don't, you know, so that song where I'm saying like, don't listen to this in 40 years, you know, listen to something else, listen to what it inspires, listen to, you know, that to me is talking about endings and change, you know, as an artist from my own perspective and my own work in life to make sure that I'm not afraid of the inevitable end of my career in life, you know what I'm saying, and making sure that I'm not clinging to my legacy, you know, but instead saying no, this is part of nature for an artist to create, you know, and pass on inspiration, and then that artist creates and they pass on inspiration and it just keeps on going, you know. So yeah, to answer your question, that's the thing, that's like the idea. um One way I put it on the album is fear of death, you know, just this fear of the end. And I say that phrase a lot on the album, and the last song is called Fear of Death. It's like I'm very interested in how can we have courage and hope and vision that helps us move through change, you know, and helps us step into the unknown. That's kind of what the album's about to me.
And are you planning on releasing any visuals for this album? And if so, like, how are
Sure.
the visuals gonna represent, most of the songs that you just talked about?
Yeah, I don't know. I find that yeah, that's hard. I'm always someone that like I have an imagination for songs and for words, but not for visuals. It's hard for me to think up visual ideas. We shot a video for a song called Slanted, and we shot a video for a song called Rain. They're mainly performance based. You know what I'm saying? Um, with some imagery put in there, but it's just not my strong suit. I don't know. I don't think I don't have much of a imagination for videos or images, more just songs and words.
And speaking of performances, do you plan on, of course, like doing live performances for the album?
For sure.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna tour next year. We have some dates booked in January and February, and the tour is for the album, but it's also like this is my 20th year of releasing music. I put out my first album in 2005, so it's also kind of an anniversary tour. So I will play new songs, but I'm also happy to play like old songs. And when I announce the tour, I let fans know, like in my email newsletter and also on social media, like let me know your song requests and or even questions, things you want me to talk about on stage, because yes, it's an album release tour, but it's also an anniversary tour. So I'm trying to you know really play all the fan favorites.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you could describe yourself as an artist in one word, what would that word be?
Me. Yeah. Yeah. I think what excites me about music, what the reason why I decided to put so much time and energy into it, the reason why I fell in love with it was because it it was a place where I just felt like I could be myself. And that's always what interested me. When I'm working on a song, I don't think about what's the best song I can make. I get excited when a song feels unique to me. That's what gets me excited, not when it feels like it might be a hit. Like I get excited when it feels like, oh, that's me. So that's the if I had to pick one word, it'd be that.
Hmm. And also kind of going back into your early days in music, um, expanding your music journey, have you taken, I guess, like any classes on music, or is it just kind of self-taught for you?
Yeah, self-taught. I've learned from listening to a lot of music. I've learned from freestyling with friends, all through my teenage years. I learned from studying my heroes. The only music lessons I've ever taken was about 10 years ago. I took 6 vocal lessons. And that was a really cool experience just to actually learn something about the voice and about singing and I loved that. I loved the learning, but I also loved how like vulnerable it was. It's very vulnerable to use your voice and to share that with an instructor and have them, try to help you. So, but that's the extent of my musical education is 6 days. Yeah, yeah,
And do you maybe want to go into like, I guess, the process of your
mhm.
newest album? Like, I guess what type of mindset were you in while creating it? Like what did you do? Collaborations and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So the way I worked on this album, the way I put it is like I slowly chipped away at it. So I would go to the studio. Maybe I'd book one day a week or two, and I would go in there and I'd work on a song or two, and then step away and work on other things. and just have that time to kind of reflect on, okay, what does this song need, and plan the next session, and if I need to bring in a collaborator, or if I need to re-record something or add something. So that was the process. It was like kind of slowly chipping away at things. In the past, I would maybe book out a couple of weeks straight or maybe even a month straight and really kind of go hard. But this one was just very kind of, you can almost imagine working on a painting and putting on a couple br- uh, brush strokes and then walking away and kind of looking at it from different angles and then a couple more. It was more like that process. Um, yeah, and then bringing in different people, a lot of Toronto people, like I was saying, people that I know and trust. Uh, but also reaching out to some other people, Homeboy Sandman, who's in New York, and Shante Ken, who's in Atlanta, like different people I've connected with as well through the years that aren't local, but for the most part, just bringing in, you know, friends and the artist community here in Toronto to add a little their own brush strokes, a few times.
And this last question, definitely wanted to get your opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
This also relates to like what's going on, I guess, in the hip hop scene as well, where there's been news, like there's been a discourse where it's just like there hasn't been a song that's hit like I think top 40 in hip hop for a long time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, like, how do you feel about that? And like, do you think also like your album contributes to not like it charting, but just more so like because people are talking about maybe there's a revival going on with hip hop, and do you think your album contributes to that?
Yeah, so I think that's such an interesting conversation because I think there's two things happening with hip hop this year. It's like one is what you just described, like there's nothing in the top Billboard top hits, right? But the other thing that's happening in hip hop is a lot of people are talking about this is one of the best years in hip hop in recent memory, right? Like all these great albums. And so so I think it's really interesting to think about what those two things maybe mean together, which I would probably say it means that hip hop is in a very good place, maybe really, but just in a kind of underground, thriving kind of moment where there's great stuff being made and a lot of fan support too. By the way, like just because there's no Billboard number ones, if you go to trying to think of who the artist may be, but you go to a Freddie Gibbs concert, Chance the Rapper concert, Tyler the Creator concert. Like there's people there and they're excited and they have fans, and so I think hip hop is in a good place, just maybe more in an underground place. But I don't think that but I have felt for the last little while like there's not enough fun hip hop hits. I do think hip hop has lost its ability a little bit to like, except for Drake, um, and maybe Kendrick to some extent, like make those fun songs to party to that are big. I mean, I miss that. I think if you go out, you'll hear hip hop hits from the early 2000s. Like those are still the ones that they're playing because those are the last, fun hip hop hits. Or maybe 10 years ago, Bobby Shmurda, like these kinds of songs, like that were like fun, big songs. So I would love to see that happen in hip hop. I'd love to see people recover that ability a little bit you know, to make those smashes. But overall, I think hip hop's an amazing place, really, really good place. Older artists are making dope albums and good music, and younger artists are making good music. I think hip hop is in a good place, and we've never been. I don't know. I feel like Billboard's never been the indicator of how hip hop's doing. That's never been when people talk about the best eras of hip hop. It's not when hip hop was on Billboard. People talk about 1994 or the golden era before that, or whatever era people want to talk about that were great eras for hip hop. They're not really. It doesn't really have to do with Billboard. It has to do with people making great music.
I completely agree. And people were also talking about that hip hop, the genre may be, I guess, like becoming more mainstream. But
Mhm.
again, like I do agree, like I think some of it is still a bit underground.
Yeah.
And yeah, like some people say it's lost this, I guess, like uniqueness, but some people say like it's evolving. So whichever
Yeah.
or yeah. And I guess is there anything else you'd like to add for the interview?
No, that was great. Yeah, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah,
It's an honor speaking to you.
thank you. Thank you.